be back here. And it's good to see so many people I don't know. I'm really happy and thrilled that the church is not suffering at all. They seem to be doing very well, thanks to your great leadership and all of everyone's participation and commitment. And I appreciate that piece of music we just heard. It's very fitting, actually, to the topic that I'd like to talk about. I too was stunned to hear that Brother Yoon had passed just yesterday. Someday, the devil's temporary victories will all be seen to be what they really are, just a bunch of sham victories. I'm reminded of what Paul quoted from the Old Testament, but he gave it a ring that we don't have in the Old Testament. In 1 Corinthians 15, verse 55, O death, where is... I better leave these on, I'm sorry. My Bible's always telling me, don't touch your glasses. Okay. O death, where is your sting? O Hades, or O grave, where is your victory? We live between two worlds. In this world, death has a sting. And the grave has a victory. But in the world to come, that sting will be long forgotten. The sting of death and the victory of the grave will be long forgotten. Seem to be just a sham. Just a temporary blip on the screen. Jesus lived between these two worlds too. He didn't live only in one or the other, between earth and heaven. He lived in both worlds. And today I'd like us to take a look at a passage in the scripture that gives us a window into his way of experiencing these two worlds. John chapter 11, the story of the resurrection of Lazarus, the greatest of Jesus' miracles. John chapter 11, and picking up verse 32, John chapter 11, verse 32. It says, Then when Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And that's true. We learn in other places. If Jesus had been there, Lazarus would not have died. How's that possible? I mean, if wherever Jesus was, nobody could die? Maybe so. If he's the life giver, if he himself is the resurrection and the life, if he's there, how can you die? So in order for us to die, he has to leave. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. Verse 33, Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, And the Jews who came with her weeping, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, who'd come to Bethany out of sympathy for this family grief. Jesus saw Mary weeping and the Jews who came with her from the house to out where Jesus was. When Jesus saw them weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. So Jesus was here caught between two worlds. And I've come to love the description of this in The Desire of Ages, that greatest biography of the life of Jesus. When I first read this chapter on the resurrection of Lazarus, I was troubled by this description of this passage in the Desire of Ages. And I said, how does this make sense here? And it took me a while to grasp what was going on in this description of what was going on in Jesus' mind at this time. Jesus groaned in the spirit, was troubled. And verse 34, he said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Verse 35, Jesus wept. And verse 36, the Jews said, "See how he loved him." Verse 37, some of them said, "Could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind also have kept this man from dying?" Very questioning about Jesus' validity, or his credibility, actually. So this group of people was not a lot only believers, there were a lot of unbelievers in the group, tearing up over this terrible loss as well. And Ellen White gives us a window into this, showing how Jesus was troubled by these crocodile tears, actually. That there's one thing I've learned that God doesn't like. He doesn't like fake stuff. He doesn't like fake worship, fake praise, fake prayers, and he definitely doesn't like fake tears. I think that's the way we would describe it in today's language. He groaned in the spirit and was troubled. God hates dishonesty and pretense. A lot of that was going on here. There's other reasons for Jesus' emotional response, emotional reaction to this scene. Verse 38, then Jesus, again groaning in himself, came to the tomb. Why was Jesus groaning in himself? Why was he weeping? Some of the people said, "Oh, look how much he loved him. Poor friend of Lazarus." Oh, I said, no, that's not it. I mean, Jesus missed him for a few days, sure. But that's not why he was tearing up. Let's take a look. I'm sorry that I didn't bring this. It would have been, if I'd had something on the screen, it would have been these words, but I just want to take it a little bit slowly here, how Ellen White, in her biography, describes Jesus' thinking at this time. Because actually we have somewhat of a conflict. We're a little bit conflicted as Christians, having studied church history and Adventist history, as to how to relate to how we should properly relate to the passing of our friends and loved ones in death. what was going on in Jesus' mind here. And I think as we look at this, we're going to be encouraged in a way that we may not have thought. That Jesus' tears actually provide us with a lot of hope. Our tears may provide a lot of hopelessness when we share our tears with one another in this world. But Jesus lived between two worlds. And here his tears provide us with a lot of hope. The fact that he was moved to tears is a reassuring thing for us today. Ellen White described as the mournful scene. Lazarus had been much beloved, and his sisters wept for him with breaking hearts. And those who had been his friends mingled their tears with those of the bereaved sisters. In view of this human distress and of the fact that the afflicted friends could mourn over the dead while the Savior of the world stood by, Jesus wept. That's what got me when I first read this. Huh? That's why he cried? I mean, the and part. The fact that the afflicted friends could mourn over the dead while the Savior of the world stood by. It's not that he was angry about it. He said, hey, God, what are you crying about? I mean, does it make sense? Here I am, the source of life, and you're crying over somebody who died, who I could resurrect just like that? It's not anger. It was sorrow. He realized how pitiable our condition is, that we didn't recognize. It's just like somebody who's starving to, and miserable when there's food just a couple steps away they don't know about. Jesus wept. He lived in another world. He had roots in another world. But he had taken, I'm quoting now, he had taken human nature upon him. And he was moved by human sorrow. Moved by human sorrow. And from the upper world standpoint, it doesn't make sense. How come you guys are so sad? What's to be sad about? But he come down in this world so he could feel the pain and the sadness. He was moved by it. His tender, pitying heart is ever awakened to sympathy by suffering. He weeps with those that weep and rejoices with those that rejoice. He's the perfect example of what he wants us to be. Never was his heart not awakened to sympathy when he was around suffering people. And yet, we read other places in this biography, in Desire of Ages, that how frustrated Jesus was. And it's all through the New Testament. Especially if you read the Greek, it's even clearer how frustrated Jesus was throughout his life. He wanted to do so much for us. And yet he could do so little, he felt. Here he is again at Lazarus' tomb. People were mourning, and he knew what's going to happen shortly. But if people could only know, if people could only know what was available to them, they don't need to suffer so much. He didn't want people to suffer Sometimes I've said, God, the more I learn about him, the more I realize he's not afraid of suffering, either his own suffering or our suffering. He's not affected by terrorism. In other words, the devil is a terrorist. He likes to scare us. All sorts of bad things. God's not scared by that stuff. All kind of suffering did not scare Jesus. And when we suffer, it's a little tougher for him, of course, than his own suffering. If you're a parent, you understand what I mean. It's a lot harder to see your child suffer than to endure suffering yourself. That's a little tougher, but God is even tough enough to do that, to not get scared by our suffering. We can be thankful for that, actually. So Jesus wept. He wept because people were suffering. And he felt their pain. And it's not a hopeless suffering, but a suffering that was, he wanted to do something about it. But he always wanted to do something about sickness and suffering and pain. He lived his whole life that way. But he couldn't do anything. He couldn't do what he wanted because of unbelief. It was causing him pain too at this time. So that's why he said, where is it? Well, from the beginning of this chapter, he keeps emphasizing this happened for the glory of God. This death of Lazarus is happening because God is going to be glorified. It's for God's glory. I'm skipping down to Desire of Ages on the page. I'm sorry to give you the reference, page 534 here. Looking down the years to come, Jesus saw the suffering and sorrow, the tears and death that were to be the lot of men. His heart was pierced with the pain of the human family of all ages and in all lands. The woes of the sinful race were heavy upon his soul, and the fountain of his tears was broken up as he longed to relieve all their distress. That's why the tears flowed. From the earthly perspective, he sympathized. He felt the pain in this. From the heavenly perspective, he wanted to do so much. He wanted to relieve all of the suffering. You know, the belief in the resurrection has gone through some changes over time in Christian history. In the early church, it was very simple, like it is for us today here in the Adventist church. You die, buried, and then when Jesus comes, you come up out of the grave, you're resurrected with a new body, go up to the clouds, meet Jesus in the air. It's very simple. But over the centuries, it got confused in the Christian church so that the idea of soul sleep, that we just sleep when we die, that went out under the influence of the Jewish idea of the soul being immortal. How can that happen? Soul doesn't sleep. So the Christianity was just totally confused after that. And thank God for our pioneers in the Advent movement who recognized so quickly by God's grace the importance of the doctrine of the non-immortality of the soul, that we are not immortal. There is no ever burning, eternally burning hell. There is no spirit that drifts off and goes to heaven and comes back to earth to be resurrected, get back. It's all this craziness that crept into the church was cleaned out by God's grace and by among the time of our pioneers. So we have a beautiful truth came back to Christianity. We have so much to be thankful for. So, Jesus wept. Resurrection. You know, if we go to a theological meeting today, all the renowned theological professors, and if you were to come up before them and say you believed in the literal physical resurrection, they would just roll their eyes and pinch themselves and say, did we hear that right? I mean, is this, what century are we in? They don't believe that. Theologians don't believe that anymore, at least the mainstream outstanding theologians. The church gave that up a long time ago. Daniel chapter 2, right? With the image, gold and silver and brass and iron. The stone, since the time of Augustine, that was not Jesus coming again to the earth. That was the church. The church came and set up Christ's kingdom on the earth now. There's no future second coming. Second coming is right now. This is God's kingdom. This is heaven. This is the new earth now in the church. When you die, your spirit goes to heaven. I mean, there's no need for resurrection. Why do we talk about that? But here, as Adventists, we emphasize second coming, resurrection, just like the early church. Very, very primitive, Stone Age concepts in theology. In our modern society, not only among theologians, but in society in general, our ideas are very old-fashioned. And sometimes we may have trouble to defend them. We may have some uncomfortable feeling. For example, I mean, what's going to happen now when Jesus comes? Somebody's going to pop out of the ground? And it doesn't, sometimes we might misunderstand what goes on. Because as children, we learn the story. We think that the person's going to go down in the ground and then the same person's going to come up out of the ground. That would be a big mistake, right? We wouldn't want that. Well, there's no person down under the ground. Sorry to tell you, but after a while, there's nobody down there anymore. So how does that make sense then? There isn't anybody there. They vanished. They disintegrated. So this whole story is ridiculous. Well, this story kind of gives us a little hint about that. How would you like to be charged or given the mission to resuscitate a person that has been dead for well over 48 hours, even calculating inclusive time? How would you like to be given that mission, to resuscitate this person? Is there any medical professional that would like to resuscitate a person who's been dead over 2 days? I don't think so. I don't think there's any scientist or science fiction writer who would like to try to imagine bringing back to life a person who's been dead over 2 days. I mean, 2.5 would be the minimum that this time could have been. The cells are not there. The cells are all broken down in that body. You have nothing to work with to resurrect this person. You can't resuscitate them. It's too messed up. You have to start from scratch if you want to bring this person back after that long a time. And that's just it. You have to bring them back from scratch. It's a matter of creation. Only a creator can do that. So what about creation? Okay, now. Well, that's a problem too, isn't it? So how did that happen? How does it work? You know, evolutionists say, well, we've got a kind of a model how things might have happened, but what do you have? Just, you believe it. Yeah. Yeah, we just believe it. We believe in creation. We believe that God, out of nothing, made the universe. And out of dirt, He made Adam. Okay? He didn't have anything to work. He didn't have any body. He didn't have a mind. He didn't have a spirit or anything to start off with. He just created it. Who was Adam? Adam was something in God's mind. God visioned Adam. God thought Adam, and God made Adam. And there Adam was. His whole personality and characteristics and everything. So how can that be a problem? How can that be difficult for a creator? Some of our writers have started thinking about these things and writing on them, and I was kind of impressed about it. My brother was sharing with me. You know, when we die, there's a copy. We're in sync with God. He has a latest copy of us when we die. It's not lost. Nothing's lost in God's mind. But thank God, He doesn't just pop these people out of the ground the way they were when they died. Praise God. We're not going to come forth from the grave the same as we went down. We're going to be reprogrammed. Reprogrammed. Physically, praise God. Physically. No ugly people in heaven, sorry. We're going to be talk about makeover. Wow. Some of us maybe a little bit more, some of us not so much. I think all of us will have a lot of work done. We'll all be young. I brought some pictures actually of my wife when she was in high school. That's when I first met her. She was a high school student. And the reason I wanted to give that to people, I don't have enough for everybody, but as many as I can, is so that we'll remember her the way she's going to be. We can remember her the way she's going, something like she's going to be. She's going to be young. Of course, my wife never did get old. You know, my wife's always worried about getting old. Oh, I'm getting old. Oh, there's a gray hair. She never needs to worry about that kind of stuff. She skipped it. She's skipping old age. So, physically, we're going to be new. Mentally, you know, we got a lot of hang-ups, right? We're all mentally ill to some degree or other, right? Right, Berenice? Everybody has mental illness of some kind or other. And that needs to be fixed. It's fixable even in this life, right? You can fix a lot of it in this life. And some of it's pretty hard to fix, though. It needs to be rewired. Not just the nerve circuits, but even the DNA might need to be redone a little bit, quite a bit. Mentally, we're going to be made over, right? Physically, mentally, morally, emotionally, spiritually, we're going to be reprogrammed. And thank God, we're going to retain our identities. We'll still be able to recognize each other. As I say in another sermon, when I came to meet my wife after 7 years, I left her when she was a high school senior. I came back 7 years later. She was 24 years old in American age. And she was actually pre-adolescent as a high school junior when I first met her. And so she had changed. I could hardly recognize her. It took about 2 hours before I caught her laughing and I recognized her laugh. That's kind of unconscious. You can't control it well, the laugh. I heard her laughing. There it is. That's the same person. It might be like that when we're resurrected, you know. Some of us have a complete makeover and young again. And, oh my, it's going to take a while. Oh, we'll hear each other laughing maybe. It's you after all. You made it. So, it's good. But there's nothing hard about this for God. I mean, a creator. We're talking about literal stuff. It's not imaginary pie in the sky, a comforting story. Even if it's not true, it's kind of no. It's not like that. It doesn't have to be like that. If there's, and just think about, I've looked at some of the other philosophies and worldviews. Did you see a video on Hope Channel a couple weeks ago? It was Creation Sabbath. Fascinating video. It was just a 2018 video. I forget the name of it, but there was I think the director of the Mount Wilson Observatory, or one of the high managers of Mount Wilson Observatory in Southern California. He was saying how after spending a lifetime looking at the universe, he was saying, I mean, he was a mechanistic philosopher. He believed that all there was the atoms and molecules out there, and that's it. He didn't believe in supernatural and all these spiritual things running around behind the scenes. Just, this is it, what you see. He wasn't a theist. But he said, after looking at the universe for all these years, it seems like we're missing something. Something's missing somehow. And the next thing really hit me hard. He said, and the thing is, I don't have enough time left to figure it out. What's missing? I don't have time to figure it out. I know there's something missing. He knew he was talking to Christians. Something missing. There's something missing in secularism, in science that denies a intelligent design. I'm so happy that we have an alternative to the emptiness, not just emptiness, but wrong-headedness of our secular age. To try so hard to shut out the supernatural, to shut out God, that they've gone way off the deep end. I understand as a historian why they have to do that. I understand as a Christian history professor why science has become so averse to theism and Bible. Because Christians were so dogmatic before. And science said, Christians said, it's this and this and this. And science said, no, it's not that. Since then, they didn't want to go back. They only want to go forward. We're not going to go back to that resurrection, physical resurrection. Good grief. What country are you from? What millennium were you born in? And yet we still believe these things because they actually make more sense than what they're saying. Our doctrine makes a lot of sense. And so, Jesus, why did Jesus' tears bring us hope? Because Jesus' tears are not the only thing that brings us hope. We have Jesus' words, right? We have a more sure word of prophecy. He says, I am the resurrection of life. I will come again. All these things. But we even have his tears. What do I mean by that? Jesus' tears show us the heart of God. God is moved by our pain. He wants to solve the problem. He wants to relieve our suffering and our pain. How is God able to leave his faithful followers in the grave? It's not possible. He would never leave his children in the grave. As we imagine in the alternative view, as one of my brother's friends said when his father died, very prominent Christian actually, said, it's sad to think about it, but it seems true. That's the end. And he gave up his faith. It's the end of their life, and it's forever gone. No, it doesn't. That doesn't have to be reasonable. That's what it looks like from a worldly standpoint. How can a person come back after they're dead? Dead is dead. No, it's not. How can the one who created this world, with all the power that he has, all the ingenuity, all the creativity, and whose heart is so full of love, how can the dead actually not come back? It's impossible to imagine. When Jesus said, I will come again, when he says, as he told Mary, Martha actually, he told her. He said in verse 23, John chapter 11, verse 23, your brother will rise again. And surprisingly, she answered, I know. I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Wow, that's how effective Jesus' teaching was, that she actually grasped that concept. It wasn't the popular idea at the time. Your brother will rise again. And so our hope for the future, it's not a myth, right? It's not a myth. It's not a comforting story. It's a fact. It's truer than anything else we can know outside of the Bible as far as what happens after death. We can't say, and I'll be honest, let's be honest, I can't say that my wife will be in heaven. I cannot say that. I'm not the judge. We shouldn't presume to be judges or know who's going to be saved and who's going to be lost. We can't say that. But we do know that they're coming back. Our dead will come back. God will not leave people hanging forever, and God will bring back his faithful followers. God will not allow us to be separated by death forever. It can happen. I can imagine that and commiserate with others and with myself. Oh, that's terrible. What's tragedy? But Jesus never spent any tears on Lazarus. And I told my family gathered around my wife as she was unconscious. What was it? 4 weeks ago now? On Sabbath? I said, Jesus is crying today. He's weeping. He's not weeping for my wife. Not weeping for Cindy. There's nothing sad about her. She's not having a hard time now. She's resting, sleeping. Literally, at that time she was unconscious. She was still alive, but basically her work was done. Nothing to be sad about. He's weeping for us. For those who are hurt and pained, right, who have lost her. That's who Jesus weeps for. And he will not leave us without comfort. And he doesn't comfort us with a story or a dream. It is a dream. It's like a dream. I'll admit it. It's kind of like a fantastic dream, right? That someday, somehow, we'll see each other again in a perfect world. It's very much like a dream. But it's God's dream. Our dreams, some of them are fulfilled. Most of them are not. But God's dreams come true. God's dreams come true. And so we see this clearly here in John chapter 11. God weeps with those who eat. Jesus wept. Not a tear for Lazarus. No, sorry, people. Jesus wasn't sad to lose Lazarus. He's not sad to lose us when we die. He knows we're with him. We're safe in his heart, in his mind. He can bring us back whenever he chooses. Better than we went down into the grave. He weeps for those who have lost, who are pain or suffering. He's comforting us today. Not with a story, not with a fiction, with the truth that he is the resurrection. He is life. Just as easily as he did the first time, he can do it again. He did it with Adam, he did it with Lazarus. It's not a difficult thing for the Creator. He's the Creator, right? He's the Creator, no problem. And on the way to Jairus' house, when Jairus lost his daughter, Jesus said, "It's okay, she's just sleeping. It's no problem." Or what was it? He told Jairus, even before he said it, he told Jairus, "It's okay, don't worry." And I preached a sermon, I said, "What do you mean it's okay? Don't worry. How's that okay? She died." "That's not okay." He said, "It's okay, don't worry." No problem. It's okay. It's okay because he's the Creator. It's no problem. He's got everything under control. God has it all under control. So we don't need to worry. We don't need to. He feels our pain. We do feel pain. But it's just for a short time. It's just for a time. Someday soon, death will be just a memory. Like Paul said, "Oh death, where is your sting? Oh grave, where is your victory?" Mine. All gone. May God help us to be faithful to him so that we don't disappoint those who have gone before us. Let's be true to him. It's my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.